Okay, hello everybody. Good evening. So we have a few people on right now. I'm gonna go ahead and get started with
Hello everybody.
introducing.
Good evening.
Let me pause that. Introducing the webinar for tonight. It is part of a series that we're doing for graduate school application processes and deciding and stuff. And so the first one that we had was how to select graduate programs in psychology. So we had several board members speak about the different fields that they're in. And today we're going to have something specifically about the graduate school application process. And we'll have questions as usual in between. Some you can send them through the chat and then we'll address them at the very end. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Brittany, who is going to be leading the webinar for today. So Brittany Griffin is a rising fourth-year PhD student in the University of Akron's Counseling Psychology program. She earned her master's degree in community psychology in 2016 and her bachelor's degree in psychology in 2007, both from the illustrious Florida A&M University, which resulted in her bleeding orange and green. She is a proud product of the first and only African-centered psychology department in the nation. Brittany is currently the 2018-2019 National Student Circle Chair-elect of the Association of Black Psychologists and previously served in the capacity of the Student Circle Strategic Planning Chair and the Midwestern Graduate Regional Representative. Her current research looks at the relationship between teaching pedagogy, cultural misorientation, racism-related stress, and overall well-being of Black professors and students. And so today I'll kind of let Brittany just take it away and she'll walk through a PowerPoint and let you all know a little bit more about the graduate school application process. And then at the end, I'll introduce Drs. Queener, Dr. John Queener and Dr. Jermaine Robertson, who will be also joining us for the Q&A session. So Brittany, you can go ahead and share your thing and take it away.
Can you see that, Robina?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am honored to be able to present this information to you all. So I'm going to be talking about the process of applying to graduate programs, just giving you all some tips and strategies. I try not to reinvent the wheel often. So this presentation was created by Drs. Ebony Vinson, Andrew Case, and Cindy Joseph, and I just revised it. So the presentation was originally presented at a 2015 MHOTEP conference at Florida A&M University, or FAM. So again, because I thought the information was so useful and I use a lot of it, then I just wanted to share the same information that was given to me. So the beginning of the presentation is going to be me just kind of talking about what you need to look for or look into prior to applying to graduate school, and then it'll actually be the actual application process. So first, we're going to talk about identifying the right field and graduate program for you, and then the application process and timeline, and then we'll have Q&A afterwards. So there are many fields of psychology. I'm not going to read everything on here, and a lot of the slides just have information that you can kind of read for yourself. And we do plan to send it out to everybody. So I may not read everything on the slides, but you'll get the information. So the last webinar that Student Circle did, I believe it was 9 members from the board that discussed different fields that they were in. So if you haven't had the chance to check that out, please do so, because they just kind of talked about their own personal experience in their field. They talked about what their plans were, what their plans are after they actually graduate, and then what they're doing now. So hopefully that helps you all out with choosing what you think is right for you. And this image, this is from 2012. I couldn't find an updated pie chart, but this kind of gives you an idea of the number of doctorates that are awarded to psychology subfields. So clinical psychology is going to be the most popular field of psychology, or at least the one that offers or awards the most doctoral degrees. And then you can kind of see a breakdown of the other subfields. And these are just the average salaries that people make in different fields. So IO tends to make the most money. Hopefully you're taking more into consideration than just how much money you are going to be making, but in reality, like that is a part of what you're going to be looking at with your career goals. I just wanted to kind of give this overall mean sum of what the different salaries and different subfields are. So those are going to differ depending on what you actually want to do. So professional services, they're going to make on average about 85,000. Teaching positions are going to average at about 62,000, and then research at about 95,000, and then management at about 110,000. So what do you want to do? So that's going to be something that hopefully guides or drives what you're doing or how you're going about looking for programs that you're interested in and applying to, and then career fields that you could actually see yourself in. So you might want to think about whether or not you want to do applied work. This can be therapy, whether that's individual, coupled, or family, community intervention programs, etc. Or you may be interested in doing research. So then you kind of want to ask yourself if you're interested in working with animals or humans, if you want to study individuals or group dynamics. And for the individual process, that would be more psychopathology, personality, or development. And then for group process, you might want to look into, you might be interested in studying groupthink, structural racism, or teamwork. But you also may be interested in both research and applied work. So I know that's something that being in the program that I'm in, and Robina said she was going to introduce Dr. Queener later, but I know I personally have had experience in working with somebody in my program who is also a teacher who does research, and they also do applied work as well. So that's kind of something that I've been able to get more exposure to and kind of see what that looks like, which has helped inform me and what I want to do in my future. So if you are interested in doing both, then maybe clinical, counseling, community, or school psychology might be things that you're interested in looking at. So what if you don't know? So if that's the case, then I would recommend talking to professors, applied psychologists, and graduate students. Or you can volunteer or work in relevant fields. You can get involved with different kinds of research programs, such as psychology, sociology, public health, etc. Or you can read journal articles in multiple psychology subfields. So graduate school involves a lot of reading. So oftentimes when professors are creating their syllabi, they're going to look at the research, or they're going to look at the literature to kind of inform how they're going to teach their courses. So reading the literature is a very, very good way to get direct exposure to the current research that's being done, and then to just kind of get you familiar with what's being done in the field that you may be interested in. So with regards to career paths, so what you want to do is going to be determine how long it's going to take. So a bachelor's degree on average is going to take about 4 to 5 years. With a bachelor's degree, you can be a substance abuse counselor, group home coordinator, program manager, caseworker, etc. Again, so I'm in a counseling psychology program, so a lot of the information I'm going to be giving you is from the lens that I have, which is counseling psychology. So the master's degree is going to take about 2 years. And with this, you can become a licensed therapist or a school counselor, on average making about $45,000. But for a master's degree with IO, you can go into consulting work and make about $75,000. So that's one of the, again, based on the chart that I showed previously, IO is one of the highest paying subfields within psychology. For a doctoral degree, that can range anywhere from 4 to 7 years, depending on if you enter with a master's degree. And then if the program that you're looking at offers summer classes. I remember a professor in my master's program telling us that the school she went to didn't offer summer courses. So her PhD program was 7 years. She definitely told us to avoid that if possible, but I just wanted to give you all the range of how long it could take to get a doctoral degree. And with this, you can be a professor, work in the private industry or for the state. And then postdoctoral training. From my understanding, it's become much more prevalent now to do a postdoc. That's going to be about 1 to 2 years. And with this, you can be a licensed psychologist in academia or private practice. So the pros and cons of getting a PhD versus a PsyD. So the pros of a PhD are going to be that there's more funding involved and it's less expensive. oftentimes when you're getting a PhD, part of you being a graduate assistant is that you teach. So they're basically able to pay students who teach less than they would pay somebody with a PhD, obviously. So it's like a barter system. So that's why there's going to be more funding to go around. It's going to be less expensive because you're giving a service to the university. You're also going to have smaller faculty to student ratio, which can be extremely beneficial if that's what you're looking for. Again, depending on the field you go into, it's going to look different. Being in counseling psychology, a PhD program is often about more than you just learning the material within class. It's about you kind of like opening yourself up, looking at your own biases, your background, how you view the world. So having a smaller faculty to student ratio may be more beneficial if you feel more comfortable being open and vulnerable in a smaller setting as opposed to in front of more people. There's going to be more emphasis on research in a PhD, but this could be ideal for an academic career path. For a PsyD, the pros are going to be that it's less selective. So you have a higher probability of getting into a PsyD program. There's going to be more emphasis on applied skills. So this is going to be ideal for somebody who's interested in going straight into practice as opposed to doing research. The cons of getting a PhD, again, is that it's more selective. So it may take more effort to get into a PhD program, or you may have to put more into it. And the cons for a PsyD is that there's going to be less funding, it's going to be more expensive, and there's going to be a larger faculty to student ratio. But again, depending on your own personality, one isn't necessarily better for everybody, it just depends on you and what you prefer. So if you look at the numbers in the starting salary, for a PhD, the average is about $63,000, and for a PsyD, it's about $60,000. The average debt for a PhD is about $75,000 versus a PsyD, which is $160,000. So this kind of goes back to what I was just saying about there being more funding for a PhD program. And this is why it may be easier to get into a PsyD program because there's less funding. And then that's kind of a burden that you have to bear coming out. So the match rate for a PhD program is at about 87% versus the PsyD is at 80%. There's a lot of information related to internships and matching. The Student Circle, we are doing a webinar next month about applying to internships. So that'll give you more information about that. So I'm not going to go into details about that now, but this is just kind of to give you something that you should be aware of when looking for graduate programs, but not something that you need to focus heavily on right now, or at least not until you have more information about it. So when you look at matching to an APA or a CPA accredited internship site, PhDs have a higher match rate at about 96% versus a PsyD at 88%. And so these numbers came from, and I have the links at the very end of this presentation, these numbers came from data that was, I believe it was 2017, but I wasn't able to find EPPP pass rate. So it goes back to 2012. So back then it was about 82% for a PhD and 69% for a PsyD. I'm not sure exactly how accurate those numbers are now, but on average, from my understanding, if you go to a PhD program, then you're going to have a higher pass rate for getting licensure or getting licensed. So what if you still don't know after looking into all those things? So some things that you may want to consider when choosing a program are your career goals. And also what may influence your career goals is the cost. So can you afford to get a PhD versus a master's degree? And then looking at a PsyD, that's going to cost the most. And then the timeline, 2 to 3 years versus 5 to 7 years. The location, so it's going to open up your opportunities if you're more open to being in different locations throughout the US. If you're only interested in looking at certain places, then just know that it may limit what your options are. State licensing guidelines. So there are, I don't know what the states are, but there are some states that have stricter licensing guidelines. So from what I know, it's best to look at what it would take to become licensed in the more strict states, and that way that'll kind of cover you for other states. The availability of the programs, how much money you're going to make, which I kind of previously discussed, and then life satisfaction. So I put black tax on there because I know when I was looking at programs, for me personally, I definitely was interested in looking at programs that had Black faculty members there, just because my race is that is the most salient part of who I am. So I knew that it was going to be a challenging environment. As Robina already mentioned, I went to an HBCU. So going from an HBCU to a PWI, I knew that was going to be a challenge in and of itself. So in thinking about ways to kind of protect myself from some of the things that you would experience in a different environment like that, like just microaggressions or just the daily stresses you experience being a Black person in environments that you may not feel the most comfortable in, that was something that I personally had to consider when I was looking at the programs that were of interest to me. So things to consider when you're actually applying. So you want to look at whether or not the program is going to match your interests, your goals, or your needs. Again, I just kind of mentioned part of what my needs were in just having faculty who I felt like would have my back, and faculty who's going to advocate for you, honestly, because like I said before, at least in counseling psychology programs, like it's more than you just learning the coursework and kind of going on about your life. There may be some trials and tribulations that you go through, and having somebody who has your back and who has your best interest in mind can be very, very important. And that can determine whether or not you actually make it through the program or whether you leave. So matching your interests with faculty. It's easier if you go to a school where a professor is doing research that you're interested in, because you have their literature that they're already familiar with and they kind of help you. It doesn't break you, though, if you go to a school where faculty isn't doing the research you're interested in. It just may be more time consuming and more like mentally draining on you. And then looking at the funding options. I remember a professor in my master's program telling us that we should not go to a school where we have to pay for our PhD. I think in a lot of master's programs, you have to pay for it yourself, but a PhD shouldn't be something that you pay for. So that's something you may want to take into consideration. How long does it typically take students to graduate? So this is information that can be found on the websites if they keep it up to date. If you're looking at that and the average rate is like 10 years, you may not want to apply to that school. But if the average is like 4 to 6, then that's definitely something that you should look more into. What do students typically do after they graduate? So this can also be found on the websites if they're kept up to date. So if you're interested in going into academia or private practice, and a lot of students who go to the schools that you're interested in have also gone on to do those things, and you kind of know that the information that the program is teaching is going to set you up for that. But there are students in my program now who, if I'm not mistaken, their research interests don't necessarily align with faculty members in the program, and they kind of did stuff on their own. So it's possible to still do things after you graduate that a lot of students in the program don't do. Again, it just may be a little bit more difficult if you're the one who has to like do all the heavy lifting on your own. Is it APA accredited? So that's something that, to be honest with you, I still don't know. I know APA accredited programs carry more weight. They look better. They allow you to be qualified for more positions afterwards, like whether that's postdoc positions, and even like other certain positions for jobs. But I guess I'm just still confused about why anyone would go to a non-APA accredited program. So that may be something that Doctors Robertson and Queener can answer when we get to them, since they definitely have more experience with that. And then applied fields. So for counseling and clinical psychology, going to an internship site is something that's going to be a part of your program. So looking at the match rate of the students at the schools that you're interested in is going to be important. Higher match rates clearly are going to be something positive to look for. And then, do you know someone who knows someone? So I thought this is important to put on here because I've talked to a lot of students who either went through the program, my master's program, and when they went to apply to grad school. So for example, there was someone who applied to the program that I'm in now. I didn't know that the student had applied to the program that I was in now until a professor asked me about the student. So I was just kind of wondering about that, and they didn't want to feel like they were getting the inside scoop. But that's what you need to do. So if you know somebody if you're a student in a program, or an undergrad student, master's student in a program now, and you're applying to certain schools, the school that you're applying to, Ask faculty members if they know anybody at those schools, because they may know somebody, and networking is not a bad thing. Using your resources is not a bad thing. And you also may just want to ask them if they know anybody at any school, period, because that may be a school that you should apply to if you're open to what area it's in. So again, just network and use your resources, and don't be ashamed to do so. So when you're creating your list, you want to identify your dream, good, and safe school options. Again, to be honest with y'all, I don't know what safe school options are personally. I thought I had safe school options on my list when I was applying. They did not turn out to be safe schools. So maybe someone else can provide clarity on exactly what a safe school option is. And then you also want to determine the number of schools based on competitiveness. So with this, if you look at schools and the amount of students who apply to programs, some schools will have they'll have like 500 something applications that come through every year. That's going to be a highly competitive program to get into versus programs that get between like 80 and like 100 and something applications. Those are going to be less competitive. So that kind of goes back to the safe school options. So I know for me personally, when I was applying for my PhD programs, when I was looking at myself on paper, I was very impressed with my stats. I had a 4.0 GPA in my master's program, very good letters of recommendation. I had positions of leadership. I just had a lot going for myself. So I looked good, but that didn't stop me from being passed over for interviews. So again, safe school options, I guess just put forward your best effort for every single program that you're applying to. And don't think that you already have a program in the bag, because it may not happen that way. So as far as the actual application materials and what you're going to need. So you're going to need transcripts, whether that's undergraduate or graduate. You're going to need at least 3 letters of recommendation. You're going to need your curriculum vitae, which is a CV or your resume. Graduate record exam. You may also need to take the psychology subtest for schools. There weren't any schools that I applied. Well, I'll get to that in a second, getting ahead of myself. So all schools don't require the psychology subtest. So if they don't require it, then that's just extra money that you could be saving. So make sure that you check the school first to see if they actually require that. You're going to have to write a personal statement and additional essays and the actual application forms for each school that you're applying to. So suggested timeline. There's a lot on the slide, so my apologies for that, but I know that you all were going to be getting this information after the webinar, so I wanted to kind of have everything in one place for you. So your junior year, which would also be equivalent to your first year if you're in a master's program. So in the spring semester, you want to select your graduate schools. The GRE, you want to do practice exams to identify your strengths and weaknesses. That way you know what to focus on. The psychology GRE is offered only in September, October, and April. So if you're applying to schools that require that, then make sure that you give yourself enough time to take it within one of those months before the application is actually due. And start saving money. So there may be resources that you have at your school that allow you to waive application fees. So definitely take advantage of any resource you can, but start saving money. So the summer before your senior year or before the second year of your master's program, you're going to want to finalize your graduate school list, plan to visit, contact faculty or graduate student, research admissions requirements, etc. So I know some schools actually have days that you can go and visit. If it's in your budget and you're close by, I definitely would recommend doing that, because that may deter you from even applying to the program, which could save you money if you have to pay for each application that you're using when you apply. Network when and where you can. So long story short, when I was in my master's program, I remember asking Dr. Robertson and Dr. Jackson Lohman about the importance of attending the National Convention for ABPSI. They both said it was very important. So I was like, okay, let me save some money so I can actually attend. I attended the conference. But prior to that, I had already, again, because I had already received this PowerPoint or this presentation when I was at the MHOTEP conference, I had already begun looking at the schools that I was interested in. So when I was at the convention in 2015, I was looking at the program booklet and I saw Dr. Queener's name listed as a presenter, and I knew that he was at the school that I was looking into, which was the University of Akron. So I went to his presentation, talked to him afterwards, gave him my card, told him I was going to be applying to the program. And he said, okay. He said he was going to be on the lookout for my application. So I know that that played in my favor when it came time for me to interview at the University of Akron, because I met him prior to an ABSI conference. So he knew I was interested in researching and I was interested in Black psychology. So if you have the opportunity and you know what you're interested in doing research on, attending conferences can be very important for you to just meet people and for them to get familiar with your face and you being interested in the field and actually like doing the research. So the GRE, you want to study, you need to make a study plan and take the exam in August if you're ready to do so. That way you'll have time to reassess if you do need to take it again. Also start drafting your personal statement because you're probably going to need to revise it several times after your initial draft. And then continue saving money and again, utilize applicable resources. So if there's anything that can save you money, there may be a GRE prep class that your school offers that you can take for free. They may give you a free book, so on and so forth. So any resource you can use, please do so. So for your senior year in September, create a spreadsheet for your selected graduate schools. So this is going to include deadlines, timeline, materials, specific application instruction, addresses, etc. So I made a spreadsheet with everything in there, and it definitely helped me stay organized. I color coded things. So when I would apply for a school, I would make that a certain color so that I knew that was done. The GRE, make sure you take the GRE and then evaluate it to see if you need to retake it again. Get feedback on your personal statement and revise that. I spent a lot of time in my writing resource lab to get feedback on my personal statement, just because that's like one of the most important statements that you're going to write when it comes to advancing your career, or at least getting you to the next platform to help advance your career. And you already pay to use a writing lab on campus, so definitely take advantage of that. Identify faculty members for your recommendation letters. So I didn't run into this problem, but I know that there were people in my program who did, where they wanted to apply to the same school and a faculty member didn't feel comfortable writing both of them letters because it just wouldn't, from my understanding, it wouldn't look good. So you may have to get to professors first before other students do if you all are planning on applying to the same program and asking the same professors for a letter of recommendation. And then let professors who you have around you know that you're applying to graduate programs, because they may be able to give you information that they wouldn't otherwise if you weren't applying to graduate programs. So in your senior year, again, the second year of your master's program in October, update your CV and your resume and get feedback and revise. Again, your professors, they're in the field, they know what programs are looking for, so they can help you with this. Personalized personal statement. So you're going to want to create personal statements that are specific for each program. So with this, you want to make sure, so you're going to be applying to a lot of programs. I personally applied to 8 programs, which was not enough. I think we're advised to apply to 12 to 15 programs. And again, once I started looking at myself on paper, I was more confident than honestly I should have been, because once those no's started rolling in, I realized I should have applied to a lot more programs than I actually did. But in the midst of all that, you want to make sure that you will send off the correct statement to the correct school. I've heard stories about students sending statements saying that they'd be so excited about getting into a certain program and they send it to the wrong school. So just be aware and cognizant of that. Your transcripts, you want to determine the steps that need to be taken with regards to whether or not you need a hard copy versus an electronic copy, and the fee amount that's going to be needed. So some schools are going to require your official transcripts, which means you're going to need hard copies, and then some want your unofficial until you get accepted, and then they're going to request your official copies. So again, in October, if you need to retake the GRE, then this would be a good time for you to do so. So at the end of October, November, make sure your GRE scores have been sent to all the programs that you're interested in. If I'm not mistaken, I think the GRE, they send it to 4 schools for you for free. And then after that, you have to pay an additional fee for each school that you need to send your GRE scores to, which is why you need to start saving money early on. So create and distribute information for faculty recommendation letters. So you can include your unofficial transcripts, CV, GRE scores, your personal statements, and special instructions from you. There may be a lot of people applying to programs at one time, so making it easier on the people that you're asking to send you letters of recommendation would just help to ensure that you get a better letter of recommendation. And also because they may be writing a lot of letters of recommendation at that time, if you give them certain instructions, like you want them to focus on this research that you're doing or this leadership quality that you have, let them know that. And then you can give them your CV and other things that kind of support what you're asking them to write about. So you want to also give them a list of schools that you plan on applying to, application instructions and addresses. If I'm not mistaken, I think most applications are online now. So when you go to apply, you put the email address for the professor or the person who you want to write your letter of recommendation, that gets sent to the person. So they submit them that way. So some faculty may suggest that you draft a recommendation just because, again, it gives them a framework to know what you want them to say about you. Make sure you complete your application forms during this time and then finalize your CV and your personal statement for each school. So the end of November, December, you want to send a gentle reminder to your recommenders because they're human, they have a lot going on, they may forget. So just make sure you gently inquire about whether or not they've submitted their letter of recommendations, which you can see because when you apply to your program or when you submit your applications or actually begin your applications, you're able to see whether or not the people who you listed as people to write letter of recommendations have submitted their letters of recommendation for you. So you'll be able to tell whether or not they've submitted them. You want to submit all your application materials at least 1 week before they're due. I've heard stories about people trying to submit them. A lot of them are due December 1st. So I've heard stories about people trying to submit them the same day and there being like overload with the website and it kind of crashing and people not being able to get their applications in on time. And honestly, if you're able to submit them before Thanksgiving break, that would be ideal for you. That way you can enjoy that little bit of break that you get because depending on when Thanksgiving falls that year, like it may be as soon as you get back, they're due. So if you can submit them before Thanksgiving, that's just something to keep in mind. Then you want to verify that application materials were received by graduate programs because you may think that they got them sometimes and they may not have. I know when I reached out to graduate programs, they were receptive and friendly. So I didn't have anyone like snap at me or anything for inquiring about the materials. So after you submit your applications in December and February, breathe, relax, engage in self and soul care, express gratitude to those who helped you with the process. So anybody who reviewed your CV for you, helped you with mock interviews, anything at all, make sure you let them know how grateful you are for their assistance. So the interviews are typically held in mid to late January, February, March. Again, practicing interviewing is very important. I know I personally practice interviewing with at least 2 professors in my program. Save money for travel expenses, clothing, food, etc. So this is important because hopefully you get offers from at least interviews from more than one school, then you get offers from more than one school. And if so, you may have to get to those individual schools to do your interviews. So just being aware of that is important. Using resources and networking can be important too. So if you know somebody who lives in a town that you may be doing an interview in, reaching out to them to see if you can stay with them, it doesn't hurt to try because that could save you a couple $100 depending on how many interviews you do have. You want to make sure you complete your FAFSA and then also search for external funding options. And this is because a lot of the deadlines for those applications are going to come before you know what school that you have been accepted into. So decisions are normally made in between March and May. I think like April 15th is a date that I have in my mind for when people normally are given a deadline to decide what school they want to get into or what school they're going to accept an offer from. Continue to search for external funding, send any additional final materials. As I mentioned before, if a school requested your unofficial transcript when you first applied, they may request your official transcript after you've been accepted. And if you didn't get in, learn from rejection and create a plan for how to spend that next year. So I know one of the presenters of this, one of the original creators of this presentation told us that she didn't get in the first time she applied. A lot of it had to do with her GRE scores. Regardless to whether or not those scores are biased, well, regardless to whether or not that exam is biased, those are exams that we have to take. So the score we get on it, it matters. So if you don't do well and you don't get in the first time, make sure you study and do better on it so that you have that on your side when you do apply to different programs. Get involved in research just to kind of like beef up your CV a little bit more, and anything else that you can think of. And then also, I know, so like I told you all, I applied to 8 programs. I got an interview for one and I got into one. Luckily, you only need one program. So the schools that I didn't get into, I had already started reaching out to them to find out why I was rejected. And a lot of them told me why. So that was good information for me to have. So I was already starting the process of figuring out what I would need to do within that next year so that I could apply again and be a stronger candidate. So again, those are just things to take into consideration. So even if you don't get in the first time, she said she didn't get in the first time, the professor I told you about. But when she applied the second time, she had like 5 or 6 offers. So she had to decide which program she wanted to get into. So there's hope if that is the situation that you happen to be in. So these are the links for the information that I have within the presentation. I appreciate you all for listening, and I'm ready for any questions.
Thank you, Brittany, for sharing that, and also like sharing your experiences as you were walking us through it.
You're welcome.
So what I'm going to do now is I'll introduce Dr. and Dr. Robertson, and then give people a chance to just ask some questions if they have. But then we also have a set of questions that grad students or people who are have, so we'll run through those questions if people haven't shared questions in the chat box. So let me go ahead and introduce Dr. Queener first. This is Dr. Queener, everyone. Dr. John E. Queener Jr. obtained his bachelor's, his BA from the College of Worcester, Massachusetts, from the Ohio State University, and received his PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Akron. So he's actually Brittany's advisor, right?
Yes.
He's a professor and teaches graduate courses in counseling psychology in the School of Counseling at the University of Akron. He is a former co-training director of the collaborative program in counseling psychology. He writes and publishes research in the areas of multicultural issues, culturally specific interventions, retention in African American males, and resistance to multiculturalism. He is also a member of the Association of Black Psychologists and the American Psychological Association. He's the current president of the Greater Cleveland chapter of the Association of Black Psychologists. He is an ad hoc reviewer for the Journal of Black Psychology. He is chair of the Division of Health and Education for the Eastern Education Research Association. He currently serves as a program director for the Minority Behavioral Health Group, a nonprofit organization founded to reduce the mental health disparities for African Americans and other underserved populations. He is a former president of the University of Akron's United Forum of Black Faculty, Administrators, and Staff. Dr. Queener has been the recipient of several awards for his efforts to increase diversity in the mental health field and higher education. His awards include Community Service for Mental Health in 2014, the Pan-African Students Association Professor of the Year Award in 2010, the College of Education Community Service Award for his work and scholarship of inclusive excellence in 2008, the 2006 American Psychological Graduate Students Organization's Kenneth and Mamie Clark Award for contributing to the development of ethnic minority psychology graduate students, the 2005 Society of Counseling Psychology section on Ethnic and Racial Diversity Community Service Award for his promotion of culturally relevant services in the community, and the 2004 University of Akron's Office of Multicultural Development Legacy, Leadership, and Excellence Award for his efforts to make the University of Akron a more inclusive place of learning. So that is Dr. Queener. And then I will go ahead and introduce you all to Dr. Robertson. Hey, Dr. Robertson. So, Dr. Jermaine Robertson is a husband of 22 years, a father of 2 children who are 19 and 17, and he is a son, brother, and friend. He received his master's degree in community psychology in 1997 from FAMU and his PhD in clinical psychology in 2003 from Howard University. So HBCUs through and through. He is currently an associate professor of psychology at FAMU and director of the Community Psychology Graduate Master's Program and is a licensed psychology in Florida. He is committed to developing and training the next generation of African-centered psychologists through his racial, cultural, and social research initiatives at FAMU. Most of all, his current interests center around applying African-centered psychological theory and principles in the community context. Thank you, Dr. Robertson. So now we'll start off with some of the questions that have been sent in, and then we can work our way through the ones that we came up with that we anticipate students might have. Sound good? So the first question that we have from Dr. Ophira Davis, can you give some examples of reasons that schools give as to why candidates are not accepted? Anyone can take this.
So I can start with so I know one of the responses that I got was research. I didn't have enough of it. They were looking for more of it, and they were looking for me having like more independent research. So even though I was working on my thesis, that wasn't enough for what the program was looking for. And then it was my GRE scores as well. So my GRE scores, I don't remember what they were. I know they weren't great. So those are 2 things that I can think of as far as what I was told about not getting accepted into their programs.
I think another reason, can you hear me? I think another reason is a lack of fit. Sometimes we reject students because their research interests, their teaching interests don't match with what we offer at the University of Akron. So therefore, coming to the University of Akron would create some dissatisfaction both on their part and our part. So we try to accept students that we know that feel satisfied with what we have to offer as a program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Robertson.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. And so ours is a master's program. And so you have the standard, our criteria, of course, being a master's program, the bar for a master's program is obviously not as high for a doctorate program. Typically, doctorate programs want you to come out of undergrad or master's programs with like a 3.7 GPA or higher. Most master's programs require a 3.0. And so what we look for in terms of a rejection rate is clearly, like Dr. Queener just suggested, not a good fit. Sometimes folks think when they're applying for a master's program, it can come out of any major, have no research interest whatsoever. We have actually seen some personal statements that were not written well, which cued us into the writing component. And that may be something, because obviously folk formulate impressions of you based on your writing samples. And I think it shouldn't be taken for granted, but those personal statements and any kind of writing sample that may be required, you want to make sure you get that proved and that it's well written, because impressions are formed there. So I think those are some important factors to keep in mind as well.
Cool, thank you. And I think like being on the other side, being in a program right now, the fit is a really important thing, because looking at it now, I'm spending all these years in a program. So I wouldn't want to be in a program where I come in and I realize, oh, I'm not able to do the research that I want to do, or there's nobody here who can support me in what I'm doing. So I think that's a really good point. Sometimes it's for your benefit too, what they say. Next question, do you believe that it's necessary for students to get master's degree if they've been out of school for too long before applying to PhD programs? So it seems like, in other words, they have their bachelor's degree, they've been out of school for some time, and they want to get a PhD. Should they get a master's before they do that?
I think it really depends on the student, him or herself. Sometimes I've seen students who waited a while, did some time in the workplace, came back to school, was more focused, more directed, and so that benefited them. For other students, I've seen that for them, it was better that they go straight through. They feared that if they took some time off, they wouldn't go back to school. They wouldn't come back. They would start making money and lose interest in school. So I think a person really need to be introspective, look inside themselves, and find what's going to be the best route for them. For some students, it is taking some time off from school and working and doing some other things. For other students, it's going straight through while they're into the school mode, so to speak.
Yeah, I concur with that. Well, I always encourage my students coming through, because the master's program is like the second stop. They're like, well, I got this master's degree. I want to go on and get this PhD at some point, but I just want to take a break. And if a student is really saying, hey, look, I want this break. I need a moment of reprieve. I'm all for it. Oftentimes, though, a lot of times the prospect of a doctorate program frightens a lot of students. And working at a HBCU, particularly, I think our students, based on the nature of the perception that the PWIs are more intense, more rigorous. Can I actually make it? Will I survive? Those are things that actually come up from students who are competing to get into PWIs, because it's only so many HBCU programs, right, that offer doctorate degrees in psychology. I think I can think of maybe 3, maybe 4 at this point. So we've had non-traditional students who have been out of school from anywhere from 5 to 20 years come back and start getting their degrees. And as Dr. Queener said, based on that individual, that may have been a good decision or not. It's going to be, it's really individualized in terms of the initiative, the drive, and the stick-to-itiveness that an individual displays. So I don't know that I would necessarily say, hey, you've been out of school too long. You need to maybe go to a master's program first and then try the doctorate program. I would really look at that particular student and these factors that are important in becoming a good doctorate level student, and see if that individual has that. And if they do and they could get in, as much as I love FAMU, and I think everybody should train in our program in community psychology, I always tell my students, if you can get that direct route to that doctorate degree, go right ahead and get it.
And I think from my own personal experience, so I graduated with my bachelor's in 2007. There were a lot of things that I didn't know in my undergrad, like during the matriculation of my undergraduate program, that I wish I had known. So I graduated thinking I could get a job and make like decent money and do different things, and I couldn't. And I had a 3.1 when I graduated from undergrad. So me even trying to get into a PhD program with a 3.1, and then after a certain amount of years had passed, like I had just been so far removed from the rigor of academia and doing research and reading literature and all those things that I know for me, it was necessary to go back to get my master's first, so that I could compete with people who were coming straight from an undergraduate program or other students who were just closer to school than I would have been had I just tried to apply 8 years afterwards without any communication or contact with academia.
Cool, thank you. So what does it mean to have a good fit in a program? Can you, Dr. Queener and Dr. Robertson, can y'all explain what that means, what a good fit is?
Yes, for me, a good fit is when a student applies, I read their personal statement about what they want to do. For example, they want to teach. We can offer an opportunity to teach. They want to do research in areas related to what our 5 or 6 faculty do. That's a good fit. They are interested in multicultural issues. That's a good fit. For Black students, I like them to be interested in Black psychology. That's a good fit. When my Black students apply, are not interested in Black psychology, that's not a good fit for me. So it's those type of things that on a day-to-day basis, as they pursue research, teaching, we as faculty, they're a good match for faculty in our program. When they're interested in things that none of our faculty do, that's not going to be a good fit. For instance, if someone is interested in doing neuropsychology in our program, that's not a good fit. None of our professors do neuropsychology. There's not a lot of prac sites in our area where they can get training in neuropsychology, so they would find a better fit somewhere else. Students who are interested in traditional Western psychology, that's not a good fit, especially if they take my classes. One of my biggest things is critiquing Western psychology and offering alternative ways to understand human behavior than what Western psychology does. So if you want a traditional program that teach you cognitive behavioral therapy, Rogerian therapy, for me, that's not a good fit with what I do.
Dr. Robertson, go ahead and unmute yourself.
There I go talking. I told you yesterday I would do that, didn't I? What I was saying is I'll make sure that I start the next question first, because Brother John just said it all for me on that one.
I hope that answered the question. That was really clear and specific.
Yes.
So I think so. I'll go to your last question, Dr. Davis, before I go to the other ones. Can you discuss the type of experiences a student needs to bring into a graduate program that the selection committee looks for? So kind of go into this good fit almost in a way, but anything else that experiences that, that you all look for?
Absolutely. I know for our program, so again, because we're a master's program and we're community psychology, unlike doctorate programs, we'll take students from other majors that are non-psychology, because community psychology, as folk may know, it's a very broad area that essentially, and as I explain this to students, when, first of all, do you know what community psychology is, right? So that begins to get at the fit, because you want this degree to do something with it, right? So in terms of community psychology and looking at all of the systems that impact an individual's life, from the first and most important system, the family system, and then you have the school system, and then you have the community-based and governmental systems, the justice system, how all of these factors come together to impact an individual's mental, emotional, cognitive well-being. We start really processing what our program is about, and the students that we want in terms of their experiences, to go directly to Dr. Davis's question, is we want them to first have the experience where they are willing to really engage in, for us, community-based participatory action and research. That's very important because within the context of our curriculum, there's so many community-based activities and expectations that we have of our students. So if we know a student may be expressing something completely different, then again, that fit question comes up. But experience in like volunteering, experience with research, experiences in some cases, because we have a lot of testing courses, individuals who may have done some work with the school system. And then to Dr. Queener's point, knowing that we are an African-centered program and what it means to really understand who you are as an individual African person of African descent, being ready to engage that, because our first course on day one, the Monday class in African Black psychology, it's a transformative course. And so having a lot of our students, although very recently in the last few years, many of our students, the non-FAMU students begin to outweigh the FAMU students, because the FAMU students actually get a lot of this at the undergraduate level in our program. But we now know that there's a very long grapevine there, that people are hearing about our program, and they're coming with experience in working with Black folk and interest in working with Black folk and understanding Black folk better. So that's something that in our program in particular that we look for. And I'm pretty sure there have been students who did not necessarily want to focus on that. They just wanted to study psychology, right? And so not having that interest is a very important thing. So in terms of experience, we want them to have a really good understanding of what it means to be a community-based action researcher and an activist, through volunteer work and that kind of thing, as well as having research experience and then an experience and interest in working with people of African descent.
The only thing I would add to that is in our program, because we're a scientist practitioner program, we expect students to enter our program and be interested in both science and practice, as opposed to just practice or just science. We want the science to inform their practice. They want their practice to inform their science. And so we expect that at sort of the base level of what we want students. Probably the second most important thing for our program, as I stated earlier, is the social justice aspect. I'm not fortunate enough to be in the African-centered program. In fact, sometimes Brittany and I talk about, if we were an African-centered program, we wouldn't probably have APA accreditation, because APA accreditation requires you to do some things that's against African-centered psychology. So what we do talk about is social justice and talk about equity and fairness and things of that nature. So student has to be interested in that as well. And probably one of the things that's really important for me is that a student has to be really ready to think critically. One of the things that I try to do in all my classes is for students not to just accept what they read or what I present to them, but before them to be able to actually critique everything that they experience, everything that they read. So that's a high quality for our program as well. And then finally for me, it's really important that students who are entering a doctoral program be resilient. Sometimes a doctoral program can actually be oppressive. And you have to have the ability to overcome that. You have to have the ability to bounce back. They want you to, our program wants you to be committed to us and us only. And we do that through comprehensive exams and other assignments. And so you have to really be ready to be persistent, resilient, and put some things on hold until you get through our program. Then once you get through that program, then you could do some other things. The other thing I tell my Black students is that because we are at a predominantly white institution accredited by APA accreditation, we're going to teach you Western psychology. And in order for you to pass comprehensive exams and a EPPP, you're going to have to know Western psychology. But in order to be useful to the Black community, you're going to need to know Black psychology. So what I want our doctoral students, especially our Black doctoral students, to do is to earn 2 PhDs, but we're only going to give you 1. And that requires you to be persistent and committed to the Black community to be able to do the extra work and extra research that the program and APA may not recognize, but it's very important for you to do that work in order for you to be a benefit to the Black community.
That is a whole word. Thank you. So when I graduate, I can say that I have 2 PhDs, and I'll quote you. Another question that was asked is, I think, Brittany, in your presentation, you mentioned, I think I heard you mention counselor education. So the question is, can someone discuss the issues that students and graduates may encounter if they have a degree in counselor education as opposed to counseling psychology within the academy and in the world of work outside of academia?
Our program used to be in a department where there was a counselor education program. To me, the counselor education program and the counseling psych program was sort of like the Bloods and the Crips. They were fighting over the same territory. What was more important to me, and I used to get into conflicts with faculty, what's more important to me was students' commitment to the Black community or commitment to social justice, whether or not they were counselor ed or counseling psychology. So we made a big deal of that, or they made a big deal of that in the academy. When you get out in the real world, people don't care whether you're counselor ed or counseling psych or something else. They want to know whether or not you have the skills to actually help people. For instance, I'm a part of Minority Behavioral Health Group, which is an African-centered nonprofit mental health organization. And we hire counseling psychologists, we hire social workers, we hire counselor eds, we hire marriage and family therapists, because we don't care about what sect you belong to. What we care about is your commitment to the Black community and Black people. And so even if you're a counselor ed, if you're committed to Black people in the Black community, then we're interested in hiring you. You can be counseling psych, which I am, but if you don't have a commitment to Black community and Black people, I'm not interested in you.
Do you have anything to add, Dr. Robertson?
Oh, no, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm going to go to some of the questions that we came up with that are commonly asked. So you talked about personal statement a little bit, Dr. Robertson, and mentioned that you have read some that are just telling that the writing is not up to par or may indicate that it's not a good fit. So I'm wondering, what are some tips that you all have on how a student can represent their research interests in their personal statement in the way that connects to their advisor's line of research? So we'll say, assuming that the student has done their background research and knows that there is some sort of connection between my research and what you are doing.
So you mean the prospective advisor, the advisor that they would be working with if they got into the program?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, the personal statement, the first thing I do when I talk to students about it, whether it's student in reading them, but as a bridge program to a doctorate program, and getting and focusing on getting students into doctorate programs. Now, since I've been there since 2004, and the program did the exact same thing for me back in 1997. We have a really good demonstrated track record of getting students into these doctorate programs. And the personal statement, as I tell students, is it's really the committee's window into who you really are. And you only have about 2 pages, I say. You know, other Dr. Quinter can talk about what he and his committee, what they look for in terms of pages, but it's always been my advice to students that uh, the committees are going to be inundated with applications, and they are probably not going to be interested in reading a 3 to 6 page personal statement. So we encourage students to be as concise as possible, but tell the committee who you are first in terms of your character and your ability to um, have that fortitude and toughness and resilience that we've been speaking about to actually get through a doctorate program. How things have sort of come together in your academic career and how your life has informed you in pursuing and sticking to and maintaining that course. And then speaking to how the program that you're interested in can further facilitate those short and long-term goals and objectives that you have. And that may be for a school that is, as you read their mission statement, a program that is, whether it's scientist practitioner or practitioner scholar. I don't even encourage my students to apply to the clinical scientist models because they're very clear. Unless you want to just do research, Indiana says don't even come here. Those who don't fashion themselves as clinical researchers needn't even apply. That's what they tell you in their mission statement. I show this to my undergraduate students in my clinical psych class. So I think when you're fashioning that personal statement, you want to have yourself at the center, your qualities, your skill set, your academic ability. You want to play all of that up. And then, yes, if you do have an idea, because a lot of students don't, and they really should. Um, but if you're not specifically sure exactly who you might want to work with, speaking to your ability to do research, especially if you're applying to a PhD program. A PhD is a research degree. So somewhere in there, you have to speak to your ability to conduct research independently, whether you were an undergraduate and you did a senior thesis, and talk about that and how you want to expand that and how that doctorate program will facilitate you expanding that. That's critical, whether you're a master's student and did a master's thesis. This is all important. And again, remembering balancing all of that in that 2 is what I say. Again, maybe 3, Dr. Queener. I've not sat on a doctorate committee, so I don't know how frustrated and how overworked they all feel with these things. But 2 to 3 pages, I'm thinking at max, and it needs to be above all else. You've put so much into it. You've been spending your summers, as some of my graduate students are doing right now. My first years, who are rising second years, their summer now is devoted to getting this stuff together. And I hope many of them are on this call, that you absolutely have to make sure that you have other people read that, and it's grammatically correct, it flows, it's punctuated properly. All of that matters. And so that's a long-winded answer, but the personal statement, I think, is really, really very important. You could actually have a webinar just on that.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Dr. Robertson. The personal statement is for our first glimpse at who you are as a student, who you are as a person, and who you could be as a doctoral student. And so you have to share some things in your life that would fit with us as a program. The second part of the personal statement that I like to see, and because Dr. Robinson is right, by the 15th, 16th, 17th, and we usually have 50, 60 that I look at, I'm tired. So one of the things I start looking at, start cheating ahead and see if you're interested enough in our program that you've at least gone to our website and look at what we do in terms of faculty, look at what our philosophy is in terms of a program, look at where students are placed in terms of internship and practica. When you do that type of research and you can speak to that, that lets me know you're really interested in the program, and we're just not a program that you put on your list in case you can't get in somewhere else. And so when you do that, then that lets me know you're strongly interested. There's also a writing sample. When I see grammatical errors, that's another way we can weed you out if we're tired of looking at applications and tired of considering people. So make sure you have someone proofread. Another thing that can knock you out is we're a counseling psych program, and you put down how you're interested in a clinical psych program. And we're like, okay, this person is not really interested in us because they don't even know what we are. So it's those type of attention to details that you have to pay attention to in order to make sure we give you our full attention when we read your personal statement.
Thank you. It sounded like you were volunteering yourself for the personal statement webinar, Dr. Robertson.
Did it really sound that way?
I mean, you started it. You gave him like the beginning, middle, and end. Let's see. So I'll take a few more questions just for time's sake. One of the questions, so Dr. Davis has a question about the importance of certification and licensure and how programs can prepare students. So how important is licensure? Y'all can touch on this briefly. I know that in the next webinar, that's going to be about internship applications and stuff. We'll get more into that since that's kind of like that next stage. But can you all talk a little bit about the importance of licensure and how a program may be preparing students for that type of certification?
I yield to Dr. Queener on that one.
Okay, and I'm not going to have a lot to say because our graduates say that we don't spend enough time on licensure issues. And part of that is because we're preparing them for internship, and licensure is another step away. And so we talk about it in our ethics class, but we really don't do a lot around the EAAA in our program because it's so far removed from the program itself. However, one of the things that we brag about is how well our students do on the EAAA. And so we take the accolades that come with it, but we don't do a lot in terms of telling students about it directly. However, because our program is an APA program and students are required to take different courses.
Hello.
Did we lose Dr. Queener?
Oh no.
Yeah, my iPad keeps saying about 10%, 9%. So
Oh no.
so no, I have to mute my video to plug it in and keep it from draining. So
Oh, okay.
y'all wondering why I keep disappearing.
Oh no, that's fine. Yes, I think we did lose
Losing.
him.
So I think Brittany's looking to give him a buzz, but I think and just hearing what Dr. Queener was saying about the EAAA and his programs focus on, I'm at 5%. His programs focus on on their curriculum and getting the students through up to the point where licensure matters. That means you've gotten your internship and now you're about to become soon to be hopeful professional. I think he may be selling him and his program a little short there, because at Howard, while they didn't train us on EPPP per se, from the curriculum, the experience. So Howard started us out with practicum, I think, the very first semester.
Oh, wow.
So we began really engaging on a practice level issues, scenarios, whether it's ethics. So the ethics courses that we had to take prepared us, I think, for the ethics section on the EPPP. And the theories, the history, the seminar courses, depending upon the emphasis that these programs have, it can be whether or not it's measured. And I don't think, because there have probably not been any systematic measure of the impact their program have, they just look at the numbers and see their students do so well. But if it's a good program, I think students from that program will typically do very well on the EPPP. I know that first time pass rate, and then by the second time for sure, it's a charm. So I was just trying to pick up some of your slack there, Dr. Queener, because we lost you for a moment.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I was saying, I was just picking up a little bit of your slack because we left you there for a moment. I think I was saying that you may have been, playing you and your program just a little short. I'm sure your curriculum and your design has a lot to do why your students do so well on that EPPP. Just maybe not something that you all have done any kind of systematic research and measurement on the impact that curriculum has, but I was sharing that with respect to Howard, we had a lot of ethics-based courses, a lot of content courses that actually were helpful for me when it came time to actually studying for the EPPP. So the program, my program, I thought was instrumental, even though I did most of that studying directly for that test myself.
Right, I agree. I think when I got cut off, I was talking about how some of our courses help students for different sections at EPPP. So in that way, it does help students for it, even though when those courses are taught, they're not taught in the context of EPPP. But again, also in my own experience was that after I graduated and got the necessary hours to sit for the exam in Ohio, I spent many of hours studying for the EPPP. In fact, I bought those. They were $450 when I took the test. It's probably more now, about $600 now. And that helped supplement a lot of what I learned in graduate school and directly helped me with the exam. So I think a program can indirectly help you, even though they may teach courses with the content being on the EPPP, but they might not talk about it in that context. But you definitely will need to do some follow-up studying with the books and workshops and things that they have to help pass the EPPP. The other thing I talk to students about is if you're not sure where you want to be, check out the cutoff rate for different states to make sure that if you might be in a state that you're not currently in, that you score high enough that you don't have to take the EPPP again. So try to score high enough for whatever state you potentially might end up in as a professional.
Yeah, and this is a webinar that I definitely will volunteer when y'all get to this point to actually put on, because Dr. Queener mentioned those tapes. I think so. I graduated in 2003 from Howard, so I recall studying for that test and paying for an online program, and then I had a separate program that was about $550, Dr. Queener. So it may have gone up about $100 since the time you took it, and I'd have those audio tapes, and I'd be driving around on family vacations. We'd be playing. This is when they had cassette tapes, and my family would have to hear about neuropsychology, because I would play these things everywhere we went, literally.
Thank you. So a couple more questions from here, and then I'll have y'all give some last words. So I'm wondering if anyone can speak to this student is in their last course of the master's program in industrial organizational psychology, and they're wondering how, if you have opinions on how IO Psych may be beneficial to the Black community.
Yeah, for sure. I've been talking about, I'm on the ethics committee, and we're working on the AB-Psy ethics committee, because in the bio, I never put that I was the AB-Psy avid member and very involved. I think that just goes without saying. Most people aren't involved. But still oversight. But yeah, on the ethics committee, we're really looking at examining an organizational model for the Association of Black Psychologists that ushers in really a paradigm shift in terms of how we're structured, in terms of how we organize. And one of the things we've talked about is how important it would be to have an IO trained psychologist look at our organization, because our organization, as much as we all love it, our organization has some significant and substantive restructuring and reorganizing that we need to do to be better as we move to build. I think our theme is Afrofuturism.
Yeah.
To see ourselves in the future, how can we better structure and organize ourselves? And so what we need is we need organizational models that facilitate Black organizations, just not just the Association of Black Psychologists, but all our Black organizations, to help us sustain and maintain ourselves. So absolutely, I think IO is of critical importance for our community, and encourage that master's level person to definitely stay that course.
Yeah, for sure. And then this is, I think it's also a question that you can answer, Dr. Robertson, is do students from master's community psych programs become certified as substance use professionals?
They can. They actually can. A lot of we don't focus on that. That's one of the things we encourage our students, because a lot of students, although we don't offer a license, a master's level license as a part of our program, we are in partnership with the mental health counseling. So in certain states, they call them LPCs, licensed professional counselors. Other states call them LMHCs, licensed mental health counselors. We have on our professional track students who actually take, it's about 4 or 5 courses that our program, as a non-licensed program, actually lacks, that we have our students take over in the summer. And one of those is a substance abuse course. And so students can get the community psychology degree, or even while they're getting it, look and seek substance abuse certification, because that is most certainly a very needed area. And being a community psychologist and getting that certification can be, very, very important.
All right. And then last question is it seen negatively if students enter a program with children? So some people may be coming in and have families already, and I guess they'll be wondering about the perception of that.
I think our program doesn't have a negative perception of that, but given the demands of a doctoral program, it's much harder to go through a doctoral program with children than without children. One of the things I often tell my students, that I was not a very good parent when I went through our doctoral program, because there were times that I would want to spend with my children. We had 2 small ones at the time, that I had to study, or I had to do research, or I had to do something related to the program. I was blessed enough to have a wife who understood that. She understood that it was going to be short term, and that I was going to eventually finish and get back to my duties as a husband and father. But if you don't have that type of support around you, then it's much more difficult than it is if you don't have any other responsibilities. So I'm saying, if if you have children go through a doctoral program, make sure you have a support system in place to be able to help you out as you go through the program. But it's something that you definitely can do.
Absolutely. I attest to that. I mean, Sister Rabina told y'all I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. So my wife actually tells stories about how my daughter would be at the window there in PG County, Maryland, crying, "Where am I? Where am I?" She was very young, because I would be gone so much. And she's a school teacher, and so she basically paid paid my way to this education. And as Dr. Queener said, and being in DC, we didn't have any family because we're both from Florida, and so we had to build our support system. And fortunately, Howard was a program that was sensitive to those kinds of things. And so if I needed to take her to a class because my wife and we had a conflict, that would be something that I would do. It was a rare occurrence, but support in terms of having to stay home with a sick child. A lot of my faculty, they understood that, and so they were willing to work with me if I had to miss a class because my wife is a school teacher, and she was our primary breadwinner. And so just knowing all of these challenges going in, I agree with Dr. Queener. You can do it, but it's going to be something that you really have to negotiate and navigate.
All right, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll give you all a chance to just say like any last tips or thoughts that you want to share as it relates to the application process, and then we'll close out.
I guess the thing I would say is to take the application process seriously, get as much information as you can about the programs to which you're going to apply. Recognize that where you go to graduate school is going to have a major impact on the rest of your life in terms of what you learn and how you apply it. You will develop some long-term relationships, not only with your colleagues, but with faculty as well. So it's a very important decision, and to make sure you take the time and invest in understanding the program and understanding yourself so you can make the best decision possible.
Anything to add, Dr. Okay, go ahead, Brittany.
So I was just going to second everything Dr. Queener said, of course. I think as a student, it's also important to look at the program that you're going to. You can learn a lot from the things that I'm distracted, y'all, because Dr. Robertson's calling me. I don't know if I should answer or not. I'm going to call him right back. So there's a lot that you're going to learn in your program while you're going through, and it's going to set you up to be the best, whatever you want to be, as far as it being like a clinical psychologist, counseling psychologist, etc. So just being aware of the program you choose is going to be important. So I learned a lot in my classes, but I feel like I learned more from the conversations that I have outside of the classroom with Dr. Queener. So in addition to being a good fit for the program that you're in, making sure you have like the team around you that's going to support you throughout that. So Dr. Robertson is like my official JEGNA. I feel like Dr. Queener is also my JEGNA because there's no way I can make it through what I'm going through now without either of them. So making sure you choose a program where you're going to have a good support system is really important.
Yeah, thank you. And I think for me, I would just say that kind of to bring together what y'all saying about fit and, the program mattering a lot in the application process, I would just encourage you to stay true to yourself. I know it's hard because you have to like make yourself look good and the writing should be this and that, but there's some core things that you should stay true to. So like your research interests and the populations you want to continue to help. So I would say just be authentic to who you are, and if you get accepted or if you don't get accepted, at least you know that you stuck to what you want to do, and they'll be able to see that you don't want to go through a program changing yourself. So hopefully all that was helpful. Please share the webinar with students or other individuals who may be thinking about applying to graduate school, especially if they're particularly psychology programs. And then just reach out to us for any questions and stuff that you may have to. I'll put my email down here below, and if you all contact me, then I can put you in contact with Brittany so that you can get the PowerPoint from her, and then also put you in contact with Dr. Cleaner and Robertson.
Hold on, Robina. I don't know if it's going to start echoing, but Dr. Robertson wanted to say something. I hope you all can hear him.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dr. Robertson.
Hey group, I apologize. My device lost its power, but I've enjoyed this thoroughly, and I hope those on the call who have interest in going on the doctorate programs, I hope you found it useful and helpful. And I just want to commend Sister Rubina, Sister Brittany, and the student circle for putting on such an awesome event, and I'm happy to be a part of it. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Robertson. Dr. Robertson is also one of the co-student circle advisors, so I wanted to make sure I put that out there. He's very supportive and influential in all that we're doing right now. So we appreciate you, Dr. Robertson.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all.
All right, I put the contact below, so just use that if you all need to contact me. Thank you, Dr. Cleaner.
Okay, thank you for inviting me.
No problem.
Okay, peace.
Yeah.